And we'll be good to go. All right, guys, welcome into the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast Week 11 Waivers Show. This is a brand new segment for us. We've been a little bit slow lately on getting stuff out to our patrons, so we thought, let's do a live stream. And we've got a lot of good stuff here for you. This is a very important week in the fantasy season. We are now 3 weeks away from playoffs. Hopefully you play in a 14, 15, or 16 playoff week. If you play your championship in week 17, I'm so utterly sorry. It is what it is, man. But you should get your commissioner to change that. So people that are making that playoff push, your trade deadlines have passed. They are gone. And we need to be crafty on the waiver wire. We need to fill some potential holes in our rosters, especially with teams like Green Bay and Seattle and Tennessee and New York on bye, New York Giants, that is. So I've got my esteemed colleague here with me, Mr. Scott. We call him Producer Scott, but he's also known as Scott of the North in many circles. What's been going on, man? Sadly. Yep. Yeah, and that's the whole point, right? We do this show to help our listeners, help the community. I know there's been lots of stuff come out today, but people like to hang out on YouTube at night, and this is when you got the downtime. So hopefully you're spending it with us. We're going to waste really no time. We're going to get into our four major positional sections: quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And it really is an interesting landscape this week, Scotty. Mm-hmm. 100%. Apparently, we have a little bit of an audio issue, Scotty. We can't hear you. Mm-hmm. You're coming through good on my end, and our NDI source is picking you up. So just give a quick rundown on your mic settings. Maybe hit mute. Check your headphones. Unless Taylor Muir is trolling us. I don't know. He's an IT guy, though, so, I mean, he should be able to figure this out. I will carry on, and we'll see what we get. Quarterbacks. So we're going to go into the quarterback position, and I know you're probably thinking, Kyle Allen? Really? Yeah, really. He's only 16% owned. Got a really, really juicy matchup against the Atlanta Falcons this week. Kyle Allen has been more than serviceable as a quarterback option, and I think this week when you look at the waiver wire, it is quite bare, especially in the leagues that I play in. If you're in a 12-team league, it is gross out there. Nick Foles is out there for some of you. He's 21% owned compared to Kyle Allen. I think Kyle Allen this week has the better matchup between the two. That's why Kyle Allen is our number one quarterback for you guys to try to get. The key pieces why I like Kyle Allen. Last week, had a career high in terms of yardage, 307 yards, only one touchdown in a fairly competitive game, 65% in a snowy day against Green Bay. And we know that Green Bay's defense is, no slouch, especially the secondary. So Kyle Allen looked good. They got a great matchup against Atlanta, and I think that they can keep building on this. Now, in terms of fab, right, and I hope that most people listening have a fab system. How much would you consider spending on Kyle Allen? Right. Right.
Spend it because you can't take it with you. Like you can't long-term GIC invest this thing. You might as well spend it and try to win the season now because, as I said, right now 1 win or 2 wins can be the difference between you missing the playoffs, wild card, or a bye week. Like, it's huge. Go for it now.
Yeah, you're right. It is absolutely huge. For me, okay, there's 2 scenarios I think that exist with Kyle Allen. Number 1, if you have yourself, let's say, a Jameis Winston, and you don't like the matchup this week against New Orleans, and you'd rather pivot off of Jameis Winston, I'd be comfortable spending about 10% fab on Jameis Winston this week. Or sorry, not on Jameis Winston, on Kyle Allen against Jameis Winston. That's what I'd be comfortable spending. If maybe you are playing keep away against an opponent that maybe has Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson on bye. Those are 2 quarterbacks that might be tough to fill. And when you look at a waiver wire, I'll give you an example in our league. You got Dwayne Haskins, Mason Rudolph, you've got Baker Mayfield. You've got all these guys that they're not the greatest plays.
Ouch.
And
if I had to summarize that list you just said, I'm going.
And those are the
ouch.
best. Like, we haven't even talked about Brian Hoyer or Jeff Driscoll, who was not bad, but I'm not looking to stream him. Then you've got Ryan Finley. It's pretty bare out there, even Matt. Even guys that you had
it's absolutely
some
bare.
sort of trust in, like Case Keenum, who at times could be good. He's now got the backseat to Dwayne Haskins. So for me, Kyle Allen is the best play, and I think if you can take him away from somebody, you have to force them into starting a Nick Foles, if available. But he's coming back. He's coming back off of injury, off of IR, and we don't really know what that presents. So I would be willing to spend 10 to 20% to take Kyle Allen away from a desperate owner who might need to win a matchup, who has a Rodgers or a Wilson on their bench, or if you are a Wilson or Rodgers owner and you need a play, I would spend up to 20% because I think that Kyle Allen is going to have a career week against the Falcons.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, as we discussed, to me, it's always about the tier break. And I've always said I'd rather overspend by 10% in fab and get the guy at the top of the tier break than be conservative, say underbid by 10% and then have to play the game week after week after week trying to get whoever is left out there. Where, like you said, a guy like Kyle Allen, I'm huge on him because all he has to do a lot of the time is do a 5-yard flip out to the
explosive,
to the fantasy MVP. There's no debate. He doesn't need to throw it really far down the field. A 5-yard dump out to CMC is the same as somebody just launching at 85 yards sometimes. And to me, that guy, if he's still on the waiver wire, he's good for the rest of the season. I'd take it. That schedule is money.
Atlanta, New Orleans, Washington, Atlanta, Seattle, Indy to finish the year. Pretty solid schedule. There's some matchups in there I might not want. New Orleans next week isn't great, but Seattle, Indy, Atlanta twice. That is fairly juicy. So Kyle Allen could be coming up as a very streamable candidate over the next couple weeks. Nick Foles, 21% owned. He has to go to Indianapolis this week. Indy didn't look too sharp on the defensive side this week. Nick Foles is his ownership percentage is quite low. The dynamic for him, though, coming back, replacing Gardner Minshew after an abysmal London performance, only putting 3 points up on the board after being so great. How do you perceive Nick Foles right now in his comeback?
I was thinking a lot about that because he is one of the more appealing options on the waiver wire.
He's got
right
the name
now.
value.
Well, he does, and I'm a big fan of trying to get players that you genuinely believe in their skill. You believe in them as a football player. And as we discussed a little before we hopped on here, I'm someone who, say you're looking at a Hoyer or these other options that are out there, I think Nick Foles is one of the best quarterbacks available. Now, the question that comes out is, how's his rapport with his wide receivers? It's been a long time since week 2. Yes. So I will always side with a player who I think has more raw skill than ones who are maybe in a slightly better situation. Ideally, you'd want to grab him, stash him, see how he does for 1 week, and then maybe roll him out. But if you're in a desperate situation, I would start him over a couple other quarterbacks who may be in slightly better situations, but I think he is a better quarterback.
Yeah, whenever he comes back from injury, especially being out of the rotation for this long, I like to wait, kind of like you said, let it breathe. Off camera, we were talking about it to see how the rapport is. But yeah, if you're really stuck, it's not a terrible option. I'm really interested to see how D.D. Westbrook, if he's back on the field, how he comes back to maybe light with Nick Foles at the helm, because under Gardner Minshew, we saw DJ Chark absolutely explode, was a top 5 wide receiver for the first half of the season. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of role or dynamic plays out from here on. If we look at the rest of Nick Foles' matchup for the rest of the fantasy season, Indy this week, which I'm not thrilled on the matchup, and I'm also not thrilled with him coming back. Tennessee next week, also not a great matchup, but then you've got Tampa Bay, can be thrown on. The Chargers, not a great matchup, week 14, but then Oakland, Atlanta, week 15, 16. So I do agree with you as a stash play, pretty solid. What would you spend on Nick Foles if you had to go out and get him this week?
The thing is, to me, when you're talking fab, a lot of it does come down to necessity. If you're in the same situation as when we talked, Alan, then I would say 15%, maybe 15% cap. But once again, if you're quarterback needy, maybe 20%. It's I would obviously be targeting Allen, but it's the tier break. I would rather have Nick Foles than a Hoyer, and it gets just worse and worse and worse. Yeah. So yeah, and that's the thing is depending on your need, if he's just a stash to see how it goes, tops 10%. If you need to roll out a starter, 20, potentially 25%. If you need that win, you need a quarterback.
For me, I think, I'm not too high on Nick Foles this week. For me, it is a 5 to 10% stash. If I get him, great. If not, it is what it is. But yeah, down the stretch, depending on how things go, he's quite attractive. We'll jump ahead. So last one here, we've got our boy Derek Carr, and we contemplated putting Baker Mayfield's name up here. Here's the thing. Baker Mayfield plays on Thursday. He plays against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Has been one of the best defenses for fantasy purposes. They don't give up much. Minka Fitzpatrick has been an absolute weapon since coming over. They're solid, and Baker has not. He is the quarterback 23 on the year. He's the quarterback 17 over the last 3 weeks, 8, 9, and 10. I think a guy like Derek Carr, who's actually 7% less owned at 45% against the worst team in football, the Cincinnati Bengals, is a far better play. So if Derek Carr is out there on your waiver wire, put some confidence into scooping him up. The run game is quite healthy. Josh Jacobs continues to be a force. You've got the tertiary backs in Washington. Who's the other one? Jalen Richard. You've got those two, intermixed in that. But you've got Darren Waller, healthy. You've got Tyrell Williams coming back to the field. Hunter Renfro's kind of been breaking out a little bit. I really like this team, and I like Derek Carr.
Yeah, I think he's somebody who kind of sneaks under the radar. I mean, when his weapons are healthy, really, I think the big component is his run game is quite excellent. I mean, that could be easily a Rookie of the Year candidate that he's got in his backfield, potentially the Rookie of the Year. And what that means is they're going to have to respect that run game. They're going to have to stack the box at least a little bit. And with Williams and Waller healthy, there are much worse plays out there, and he's definitely owned in less than 40% of leagues?
Ownership percentages. These are all based
under
on
50,
Yahoo, by the way.
Yeah, so owned in under 50% of leagues. And that's the thing about the quarterback position. The fact that a guy with that many options is sitting there ready for the taking. Don't forget about him, because he could be in for a
there's
week.
two game script narratives that you could buy into. One, it's that the Oakland Raiders assert themselves on the ground and they continue to just push the ball on the ground and they neglect to throw at the rate that they should. There's the other narrative, Scott, that you've kind of just displayed to us, that they could commit to stopping the run and force Derek Carr to throw on them. And I think that's the more likely option, especially given Cincy's personnel. I would challenge Derek Carr to beat you through the air and over the top. So I think if that's what actually happens, Derek Carr is going to be great. So we'll see how that plays out. Baker Mayfield, I'm not usually too confident in starting guys on a Thursday on a short week, with how bad the Cleveland Browns have been and how bad Baker's been. I'm not too confident in his play. I said that Baker was the quarterback 17 over the last 3 weeks. Derek Carr is the quarterback 8 over the last 3 weeks. So playing well and got a great matchup.
I'll call it right now. Derek Carr will outperform Baker Mayfield this week.
Yeah, you don't have to. Yeah, no.
Going out on a ledge, as they say.
If you are with us on YouTube, you can drop some questions in the feed, and we'll do our best to get to them when we get to them. We're going to jump into the running back segment now. Brian Hill is the biggest name in the waiver wire pickups this week. In leagues where you can already pick him up, over 150,000 ads on Sleeper. Crazy. For the people that play on Yahoo, your waiver's clear 12 midnight PST. So for us EST guys in the Toronto area and down all the way to Orlando, we're looking at 3 a.m. So that's when ours clear. Brian Hill, 8% owned right now, running back for the Atlanta Falcons. If you don't know who this guy is and you've never heard of him before, that is okay. Devonta Freeman.
A lot of people have not.
Devonta Freeman went out with an ankle injury in the beginning of the game last week in Week 10, and we saw after 10 carries, Brian Hill came in, and I'll come out and say this now. We still do have a tiny bit of competition in the backfield. It's not like this guy is gonna, I'm talking about Quadri Olesen. That's how you say his name. Quadri Olesen. He's going to get a couple carries here and there, but it's not going to be to the extent of, let's say, if Ito Smith was still with the team, right? Brian Hill, 24 years old, finally makes his way to opportunity through a Devonta Freeman injury, who's expected to be out 3 to 4 weeks, and an Ito Smith trip to the IR. He's got a neck injury. So Hill entered last week's game, got 20 touches, and was fairly productive with what he had. So if you, Scott, were able to get some money in on Brian Hill and acquire him for a week or two, how much would you spend?
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting one for me because, as I said with Allen, to me, he was kind of somebody who potentially could be your starting quarterback for the rest of the season if you were in need. I do think this will be the top waiver pickup of the week. So that being said, forecast him for maybe 2 weeks of starting. I also think you have to go at least 20% of whatever your fab purse is, maybe even 25 to 30% to get him, because basically just based on the point of the season that we're at. If somebody needs a running back, and for the next 2 weeks, he could be a serviceable RB. I don't want to say RB1, but there's the potential. He has no competition. He's going to get all the carries. You never know what's going to happen with that much volume. So if you need a running back and you need to win the next 2 weeks, I mean, you got to be coming to play. I'd say as high as maybe 30% because whoever else is out there and needs, maybe they have a bye week with one of their running backs, and all of a sudden this guy is there. He's getting all the carries. There's no way that if you're conservative with like a 10%, you're not going to get it. So, you can bid 10% if you want, unless you've been sitting on your fab all season long. And even then, you're not going to get them at 10%.
No, and that's the thing. You are not, because if you look at the running backs this week on bye, Aaron Jones.
Oh, it's filthy.
Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams. People have been counting on those two quite heavily. Jamal Williams definitely in deeper leagues. Rashad Penny, Chris Carson, Derrick Henry. Not a lot of people playing Dion Lewis, but Derrick Henry's been, he's a top 5 back, and then Saquon Barkley. So there's a lot of holes in teams' rosters. Four very notable running backs. So people are going to be eager to replace, and I think that if at this stage in the game, week 11, if you can buy yourself a win, you might as well do it. So Brian Hill against Carolina, you might not perceive Carolina to be a juicy matchup, but for a running back, it certainly is. The last 3 weeks, Carolina has given up a top 5 fantasy performance to running backs. Quite specifically, week 8, Tevin Coleman, 36.8 points. That's good enough for second on the week amongst running backs. Week 9, Derrick Henry, who we just talked about, 23.4 points. That was good enough for 5th that week. And then week 10, Aaron Jones, you saw the 3 touchdown performance he laid on them this week, 27.3 points, good enough for 3rd. So the Carolina Panthers have been giving up yards and points on the ground. That could very well continue with Brian Hill. So I'm going to say that if you are desperate and you still have a lot of fab, 50%. I would go up to 50%.
No, I absolutely agree. And once again, it comes back to people forget, there is not that much runway left. The playoffs are quite soon. So the whole idea of kind of not going in on the few players that can actually save your season, if you're going after this guy, or potentially get you that great seeding, maybe you can get a bye, maybe you don't have to face that top tier guy in the league. You need to do this now, because if you get to the end of the season with $85 of 100 left in fab, way to go.
Yourself. So
you can't take it
and
with
Devonta
you.
Freeman is expected to be out 3 to 4 weeks. That would be the conservative. I guess that would be the expectation. We are hearing that it might be 1 to 2 weeks, and I think that is fairly optimistic. So Devonta Freeman should be out 3 weeks. I think would be fairly accurate at this point. What do Brian Hill's matchups look like for the next 3 weeks? Carolina, which is juicy. Tampa Bay in week 12, and if you don't know,
Tampa Bay is actually one of the top 5 at rushing, is it not? Yeah, I know it's dropped a little bit. Is it still number 1?
Against fantasy running backs. So Tampa Bay on the ground is an unfortunate matchup for Brian Hill. Then you've got the New Orleans Saints too. That's a middle of the road matchup. But hey, guess what? If Brian Hill still gets the start and Devonta Freeman doesn't come back, week 14 they play the Panthers again.
Ooh. And that would just be very, very
After
juicy.
that, it's San Francisco, Jacksonville to end the season. So for me, I'm only really looking to play in the next 2 weeks. Brian Hill definitely this week, potentially week 13 against New Orleans, but I don't love it.
No, I really do think if you're going for this, you are going for a solid 2 weeks. I mean, anything can happen, but I think if you're banking on this past the 2 week period, you're probably in trouble. But for the next 2 weeks, Could be a very solid play. So I would say just throw the money on the table.
Green light this week. Brian Hill is going to be, I'm going to say, a top 12 fantasy running back. J.D. McKissick, if you lose out on Brian Hill, J.D. McKissick has been quite serviceable, only 21% owned, has a good matchup against Dallas, currently the fourth worst against the fantasy running back. J.D. McKissick, he is involved in the passing game, he is involved on the ground, and I don't dislike him. Last week, 16 carries for 55 yards, also had 6 receptions. So he gives you a little bit on the ground in the passing game. I think he is a low-end flex option or or a running back 3 if you have that position in your league. That's kind of where I see him. I would spend about 2 to 3% fab on McKissick. How do you think that evaluation is?
I think it's accurate. Fab's always, once again, I sound like a broken record, but it does come down, I think, a lot to need. And I do think McKissick's attractive right now just because we discussed a little bit off camera. The depth right there now is pretty awful. So I do feel like he's going to get a decent amount of carries. And with Stafford on the shelf, you have to assume that they're going to be looking to run a little bit more than maybe they would with Stafford as the starter. So, I'm a little higher. I'm a little higher, but once again, I don't think this is exactly going to be a world beater. So, I would agree basically with your percentages, unless you really, really need to slot in a starting running back this week.
J.D. McKissick might not even be a guy that you need to put fab bid on. Maybe he'll still be there in the morning. I mean, pro tip, one of the things that I love to do, I typically rise early for my job. Every single day, but on Wednesday mornings I set my alarm clock just a little bit early, and I get up and I go through the waiver wire and I see who was missed, and all I do is I just go scoop. So in fab it's 0, you can just grab guys, and in waiver priority it's no waiver priority, it's just a scoop, right? So that's another strategy. If you're okay with a J.D. McKissick or a guy like we're going to talk about next, Frank Gore, you can scoop them up for free, most likely, just because of how low owned they are. Brian Hill, definitely you'll need to get in on that race, because no one should be passing on Brian Hill. I would burn first priority for him.
No one is. That's the thing. I mean, I agree with you, and sometimes I'm actually quite surprised. You'll be amazed. You think like, oh, there's all these guys. They're obviously going to get taken. So I should look at other options, and then when you log in on Wednesday morning, nice and early, and you look, and you're like, occasionally you're just like,
yeah, what?
Like, no, these guys are still here. Like, there's 16 teams. How did none of you take any of these guys? So no, I also enjoy doing that on Wednesday morning. But I will say, yes, he will not be there. There's a 0% chance that you wake up on Wednesday and can just grab him for nothing. He's the top waiver wire across all platforms in every league. So either you're in it to win it, or don't even bother because someone else.
Frank Gore will bring up really quick. 43% owned. This is the Buffalo Bills running back, the goal line back, you could say. Juicy matchup against the Miami Dolphins, who are not winless, which is great. The only winless team is the Cincinnati Bengals. But Frank,
they are.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're bad. And Ryan Finley's not the answer. But Frank Gore, so the reason why I want to put him here is in a game where they should be able to run the ball, they should be able to get into the red zone copious amounts. Frank Gore did get the majority of the goal line carries, and that might be really frustrating to Devin Singletary owners. I think Devin Singletary has a bounce-back game. He's going to out-snap Frank Gore. He's going to be heavily involved. But Frank Gore very well might get goal line opportunities, and he might get garbage time opportunities. They probably will play both of them, but in a really good matchup, Frank Gore might be worth a play. He doesn't seem to go away, and that's been his story for the last 7 or 8 years. So I don't mind the Frank Gore play this week. It's not great, but again, you miss out on a Brian Hill or other guys. Frank Gore could be a quick little scoop to give you your 6 to 10 points you're looking for.
Yeah, as somebody who in the Bipocalypse started him actually unfortunately, last week. It was painful, but I do think he's in a pretty good spot for this week. And like you said, I mean, week to week, it seems to be kind of a tug of war between the prolific young rookie who is obviously going to be the future and is a wonderful talent, and the ageless wonder, Frank Gore. Like, if you've bet against him for the past 7 years, you've probably lost. So it's a dicey play. It's risky. He put up like 2.4 points for me this past week when Duke Johnson was on bye. So it did not help. But watching the game script and things, I could see him punching one in almost every week going forward, because like Singletary and Gore seem to have their roles very well carved out. They're very different runners, and that's better than, say, you get your KC backfield or something where they're outside of LaShawn McCoy. Like, if you're playing the Williams roulette, like, they look very similar, and it's terrifying.
So wide receivers, we've got Deebo Samuel. This is wide receiver of the San Francisco 49ers, and why he's at the top of our list, only 10% owned, was heavily involved last night and looked great. He's looked great all season, more of a possession receiver. But if Emmanuel Sanders continues to be day-to-day with his rib injury, I think that Deebo Samuel is a fantastic play at wide receiver. In deeper leagues, if Deebo Samuel is taken, Kendrick Bourne, the other wide receiver, is going to be fairly decent as well, a sneaky play. And the reason why both of these two guys will be viable options is because if George Kittle doesn't play this week as well, there is huge holes in the passing game. So for me, against Arizona, super juicy matchup. They should be able to run the ball, but they might sell out and try to stop the run like the Seahawks did last night and force Jimmy G to throw, which they were successful in doing so. But yeah, I love Deebo this week. I would spend 10 to 15% on Deebo rest of season.
Yeah, in this situation, I mean, it's kind of a tale of two stories here. If Emmanuel Sanders is in fact the slightly older wide receiver that we know he is, and can't bounce back from this injury the way maybe, say, a younger wide receiver would, and if George Kittle is out this upcoming week as well with his injury, I mean, it's a locked and loaded start at wide receiver. It's not even a question. Obviously, if Kittle decides that he is healthy to go and Emmanuel Sanders does bounce back, then, you're probably looking at kind of more of a flex play. But either way, I do think Deebo Samuels he's trending up, and I think the injuries around him are really going to dictate just how much of a locked and loaded start he is.
Agreed. Yeah, I love him, and he is the most trustworthy receiver. Dante Pettis is still a nightmare. I don't want any piece of him. Deebo Samuel is the only guy, for me to own. And like I said, Kendrick Bourne in deeper leagues, get him if you can't get Deebo. Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley's been sneaky good.
Beasley.
We got to own up to this.
Sneaky good player.
Sneaky good. 32% owned. Buffalo slot receiver. We talked about him in the offseason and how he might be a safety blanket for Josh Allen. And he's been good. He finds space over the middle. When they play zone coverage, he finds the soft spots. He's able to pick up yards after the catch. And again, in a juicy matchup, we're going to play up this narrative of a fantastic matchup. He will be the number one possession target for Josh Allen. If he can't go deep to John Brown, which I expect will happen, he's going to find Cole Beasley, a little slant, a little crossing route over the middle, and he's going to be that possession guy to keep the chains moving if the run game stalls. So I love Cole Beasley. In a PPR, he's fantastic. He might give you 7 or 8 catches for 40 to 50 yards, but in a PPR format, that is, double-digit points. And if you can put a little touchdown on that, icing on the cake.
Yeah, he really reminds me of kind of like a Tavon Austin in his prime. And that's the thing. Well, in fantasy, you get those players, right? Where it's like Cole Beasley basically is a little running back.
He's a poor man's Julian
who
Edelman.
Is a wide receiver.
Julian Edelman.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he's not going to be getting like 80-yard strikes down the field, but he doesn't need it. He's going to get like you said, the underneath, the 3 to 5 yard passes that he turns into 30. Exactly, and most people play in at least a half point PPR leagues. So a guy like him, like Edelman, they're so valuable. So somebody that I feel we, as a podcast, I do feel like in general we have kind of slept on Cole Beasley. And from his time in Dallas, like you can't really fault us because week to week he would occasionally have a bit of a blow up, but he didn't really do enough there to ever put it on the radar of like a flex starter week to week. This season, a case can be made for him as a flex starter, certainly, and I would target him relatively high.
Now, a guy that is literally the polar opposite of Cole Beasley, the speedster, the down-the-field guy, Mecole Hardman for the Kansas City Chiefs, only 27% owned, and I understand his ownership percentage. I would rather, going into this week, taking in the matchup and the usage of the player, I would rather have Cole Beasley than Mecole Hardman. The difference is the floor for Cole Beasley is here, and the floor for Mecole Hardman is off the screen, because Mecole Hardman could give you 0, but the ceiling for Cole Beasley is like here, but the ceiling for Mecole Hardman is off the screen at the top, right? So all Mecole Hardman needs is one play that he takes to the house, and him and Mahomes connect on deep balls. We've seen it. That's the difference. If you need the home run hitting high end play, you're down in a matchup big after the Thursday night game. Maybe Odell or Juju decide that they're gonna have themselves a game finally and go off, and you're down. Maybe Mecole Hardman's the better play. Over Cole Beasley.
Well, and that's why you and I are fundamentally different.
We certainly are.
Players. The only thing we can agree on is that your dog Odie is an adorable, perfect dog. And beyond that, we disagree about everything else. I would rather swing for the fences. I will admit if my projections are like this, right? Like we're right there. I would look at a Cole Beasley to try to like eke out 7 points. Get me that 7.2, and I don't expect anything more from him, but I think that can get me the win. I like to swing for the fences, and if I could get Hardman right now, he's gone in every single league I'm in, all 4 of them. But I love that game-breaking potential, and just one pass to him could mean a quick 12 on the board for your team. And there's not that many guys in the NFL that possibility is there in your flex. So personally, if he was available on any of my waiver wires, I'm grabbing him.
Do you want to have a little bet right here, Cole Beasley over Mecole Hardman this week?
Yes.
Let's go.
Let's go. Let's set that stat tracker right now. Remember Stat Tracker?
I do. I do.
So long ago, but Stat Tracker was great.
Josh Gordon is the last receiver on the screen that we'll talk about. There's 2 more I'll give you for deeper plays. But Josh Gordon, 64% owned, is playing for the Seattle Seahawks. Made his first catch at the end of the 3rd quarter. Wasn't really used that much, but might need to be. And the reason why he's at the bottom of our list is because he is on bye. And you typically don't like to pick players up on bye. But Tyler Lockett spent, last night in the hospital in the Bay Area and potentially could be out for longer period of time. We don't know what his injury status is. All we know is that Pete Carroll said that he's at an MRI and his situation is serious. So if we look at that wide receiver core, we've got David Moore, we've got DK Metcalf, and we've got Josh Gordon. Someone's got to pick up the slack. Tyler Lockett's been, otherworldly this year. He's been so good, and Bob Adu stopped by to hang out with us. You're welcome. I drafted Tyler Lockett for you for $6 in our auction league. So
I'd just like to point out Tyler Lockett is one of my guys.
Fantastic call. But who picks up the slack? It probably goes to DK Metcalf, but between Josh Gordon and David Moore, it's not going to be David Moore.
I am a big fan of DK Metcalf. You and I have debated on air a lot. I do not think DK Metcalf is necessarily who is going to pick up the slack if Lockett is out. I do think it is Josh Gordon. I think that DK Metcalf, although the broadcasters will talk about how he can run the whole wide receiver tree, and I believe it as a dynasty owner, Josh Gordon is more Tyler Lockett than DK Metcalf will ever be. I think you saw it. He may have only had a few catches, which for fantasy owners would have been a disaster if you started him. They passed to him on 3rd and 2 in the 4th, 3rd and 5 in the 3rd. These were incredibly important minutes in the game. And I think that they actually have a lot of faith in Josh Gordon as the big body veteran wide receiver. Yep. He's now a veteran. So if Lockett's down, I think Josh Gordon picks up the Lockett role, and Metcalf keeps the role he has. He's the game breaker. He is on streaks. He's the dynamic big rookie. But I don't think you look to him on 3rd and 4, 3rd and 2.
I think you're going to flash.
So I think you're going to flash, and it's not so much that I think that Flash is going to put up 100-yard games. I don't think he'll put up a single 100-yard game. It's the touchdowns that Lockett has got this entire season. I think they'll trust Gordon with those touchdowns over Metcalf. And don't get me wrong, Metcalf has scored a lot of touchdowns this season, which I have loved. But I think in those situations, I think that Wilson already has shown he trusts Gordon to win him the game. And I think if Lockett goes down, I think Metcalf keeps about the same level that he has. And I think Gordon sees a massive uptick.
Interesting.
So you're rolling the dice one way or the other, but if Lockett is out, I'm predicting a big uptick for Gordon, and Metcalf stays.
What do you spend on him?
If you need a wide receiver, like you said, he's like 60% might not be a massive percentage, but we all know 60%. 60% is what he currently is. Now, I know that in math is not, that's, I think, like, maybe Mackenzie's mathematics marks or something in high school. I don't know.
Hold on. I am a high school mathematics teacher, so you can stop there. Thank you very much.
Are you?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, no, I do. At 60%, it does kind of tell the story, though. Name recognition is there. There is a massive, serious injury. I will say the news that's come out has said Lockett will not require surgery. They are on a bye week. So there is a scenario where he doesn't miss a single game. The fact he stayed in hospital overnight, and apparently it's like very deep in the leg, I'm not going to put down money he doesn't miss a game. So the fact that his name is Josh Gordon,
there's name value.
You're either throwing essentially 50% potentially of your fab, depending where you're at in this season, to get him after the news has come out, because he has, if not the best, one of the best wide receivers quarterbacks in the NFL throwing him the ball. And as we discussed about, say, a Juju Smith on the pod last week, we talked about this, right? Would you rather DK Metcalf or Juju? It's the type of thing where if Wilson's throwing the ball, you want the guy who's catching it. And if Lockett's down, it's going to be Gordon. I'm calling it.
I think that the 50% cap that you just put on it is reflective of him if he was active this week. Like if Seattle wasn't on a bye and this had happened to Tyler Lockett, I think that people would spend uber money on him. I think you can get away with Josh Gordon for like 5 to 10%.
Oh, I disagree so strongly. When he's already owned in 60% of leagues, and you have to remember that, what was it, 10 days ago he wasn't on an NFL roster? He was on the
Patriots. And baloney to the he was injured thing.
Oh, no, we know he wasn't injured. I'm just saying he went through a whole, we put him on injured reserve, he was waived, then he was brought in. Then everybody got to see him on Monday Night Football in prime time catch a bunch of third down passes from Russell Wilson. It's like a stock. You don't know the substance is there, but the hype is real. So I'm just saying.
But people will look at Josh Gordon's stat line and go, oh, 3.7 points, 2 receptions, 27 yards, 2 targets.
And if Lockett had walked off the field healthy and high-fived everybody, I agree. But there's the thing is, people who are desperate for a wide receiver right now, they're not going to say, oh, Lockett potentially could be healthy because there's no surgery involved. They're going to say, he stayed in a hospital overnight. It was called a very serious injury. I need a wide receiver, and Josh Gordon is a brand name that I recognize. They're going to throw money. So
15% max that I'm going.
I'm going to say 25.
He only played 24% of snaps.
And then he gets a whole bye week to practice with the team.
He's just on bye. I don't think you have to spend that much. That's the only thing I'm saying. And people that are desperate,
and that's the thing.
Now they're not going to spend money on him.
Well, the thing is, and it's tough. I'm a big, like I said, with Kyle Allen, big fan of guys who can potentially be starters for you, not just the next week, but down the line. Josh Gordon, depending on if they decide to go from he doesn't need surgery, Tyler Lockett, to, hey, he's on season-ending injury, T.Y. Hilton, who's that? Yeah. Right? Like, all of a sudden, Josh Gordon becomes the waiver wire ad of Week 11.
You're right. Okay, tight ends. We're not going to spend too much time. Oh, I had 2 deeper plays for you. If you play in deeper leagues, like 14, 16-team leagues where the waiver wires are absolute trash, Randall Cobb, I'm just going to throw the name out there, and Russell Gage.
I watching Randall Cobb play, like it really did. I was saying he looked almost like the wide receiver that Dak Prescott trusted the most in that offense. He looked like he was like 23, 25, just in his prime, just tearing it up for the Packers. I know his
production came off of a broken play where there was a neutral zone infraction, and they let the play on, and he just decided smartly to chuck it up. Unlike Kirk Cousins, who gets a free play and throws the ball underneath. We're not going to talk about that. Yikes. But that, he made a beautiful catch right underneath his defender. I don't know how the ball got through. That's where all of his points came, and all of his production came off of, not a broken play, but
true. But it was also he looked for him in a lot of situations that were very important for the game. He was targeted a ton. So. I mean, Randall Cobb is owned in what, 6%, 7%? I
don't have the ownership percentage, but it's got to be low.
I'm gonna go on a limb and say it is less than 10% of leagues. So just based on game script and genuinely, I watched every snap, and it really did feel as if Randall Cobb is a big part of this offense, and they trust him to make those catches on third down when it's needed. I think you could do a lot worse if you're talking about players that are owned in less than 10% of leagues. Yes. So if he's owned in 10% of leagues, you can just get him for free. Maybe. I mean, it really comes down to how many bench spots you have in your leagues. Would I start him week to week? Oh, God, I hope not. But I don't know. He looked like a Randall Cobb of old, and you might want to grab him now if you have no immediate holes to fill. Put him on your bench. Let it breathe for a week. You might have found something that, at least for the rest of this season, might be something that'll help you in the playoffs.
Okay. Tight end position, O.J. Howard, 40% owned. He scored last week. We may or may not have called that one. We want to give a shout-out real quick to a man that commented on our YouTube page, Mr. Agnew Johnson. Thank you for the love on the O.J. Howard take last week. We think the same as you, sir. So, shout out to Mark, one of our co-hosts, for putting some confidence into O.J. Howard rest of season. Certainly showed out, gets a chance to build on that performance against the New Orleans Saints. This is how gross the tight end landscape is, but I think he warrants that opportunity on your fantasy roster after we saw a little uptick in opportunity.
Well, and to me, it came down to, I had a feeling this was coming as well, because a lot of teams were interested in him at the trade deadline. It was well documented. They got a ton of offers. And front office said, we're not interested in trading O.J. Howard. I had a ton of fantasy offers for him pre-deadline because a lot of people were playing the he'll go to New England game, right? I had discussions. If I want him now because I think he's going to New England. They knew they're rolling the dice. If they don't trade, you're stuck with a tight end who's in a horrible situation. But it comes down to his skill, his athleticism. Everyone knows he should be a top 5 tight end, and he's not. So as far as as you go down the list and what's left on the waiver wire, I have a feeling that the front office at some point would say, okay, we refuse to trade him. Guess what? You have to use him. If we can't get like a second round draft pick for this absolute athletic freak and stud, then you have to use him in your game plan, because you can just roll out a blocker off the waiver wire at the tight end position. If you're not going to throw to him, then you're fine.
I would love to see the Tampa Bay front office pull a money ball, like Billy Bean strategy, like you've got to use OJ Howard. And it's like, no, I'm going to roll Cameron Brate. And then he's like, you can't play Cameron Brate today. Why is that? Because he now plays for the New England Patriots. Billy Bean just clearing house and making people play. Who do you trade in the movie? Oh, yeah. He's like, we're trading Carlos Pena. You got to play Hatterberg. That is exactly what's going to happen here. No, OJ Howard.
Well, I mean, they have such a scary passing attack. You have to, like I was saying, like you can't double team Mike Evans, Godwin, and OJ Howard. So if they really did work him into the passing attack, that's so scary. They're already the best wide receivers in the league. It's not like you just have blocking tight end options. He's one of the top 5 vertical threats in the league. He just hasn't been used at all.
Yeah, he's the most explosive guy on the waiver wire. He's definitely
he's a top 5 guy on the waiver wire.
7 targets, 4 receptions, 47 yards, and a touchdown. Now that is not otherworldly, but it is probably a couple weeks worth of production for OJ Howard. So what are you spending on OJ Howard if he's available in your league? Let's say that you are a guy that has Kittle and you lost him, or you're a Hooper owner and you need to fill the void. What do you spend on OJ Howard?
I'd probably hover around that like 20% again, just because I do feel that there will be enough people. I feel like OJ Howard's one of those stocks to watch. They're on people's watch list, as if people are aware they're underperforming and horrifically underperforming, but it's such a brand name that I think the instant there's a bounce back, you're going to see at least 3 or 4 owners that were watching OJ Howard saying, man, if he starts to uptick, the fact this guy is there, maybe I won't burn my priority or my fab this week, but if I see like an uptick and it looks like they're finally going to start using this blue chip, I'm going to grab him. So I don't think you can just roll out 10% and get him, because even though the numbers weren't otherworldly, it might have shown. You think, what are you going, 5-10?
I was thinking 5 to 7. Nothing crazy.
I would never go above 20 for this. I'd say maybe
if
15%.
You're desperate and you need to replace a Kittle, or you need to replace a Hooper, then sure, 15 if you've got,
Because if you grab OJ, you're at least covered theoretically until Kittle should come back.
Get at least 2 points.
The tight end waiver wire is weak.
TJ Hawkinson is another name we'll bring up. 52% owned, so he's available in half your leagues. Essentially, has a really good matchup against Dallas this week, and we saw a little bit of rapport with Jeff Driscoll. And TJ Hawkinson last week finally got re-involved in the offense, you should say. So I like that matchup. Another one I'll bring up really quick, Dawson Knox. I know Landon loves him. He plays Miami. We'll play up the Buffalo Bills once again. I'm surprised we don't have Josh Allen in our quarterbacks, but he is too highly owned. So that's why we don't have him there. But I am. If you can stream Josh Allen this week, he's on your bench. I love him, especially like over Jameis Winston. That would be a play that I would go. But Dawson Knox, last week, 4 of 6 targets. He has touchdown upside, so that's why I like him. A guy that people will want to talk about, Jacob Hollister. I don't think you need to go get Jacob Hollister right now. If you have space on your bench, you can pick him up, fine, but he's on bye. Okay, so I'm talking tight end for the Seattle Seahawks, filling in the Will Dissly role quite beautifully. But I'm not going to have to get him this week because he's not relevant. No,
I think you can easily keep the roster spot for this week and keep it high on Tyler Lockett. I feel like a lot of where the value in these players that we're discussing on Seattle really comes down to if after a week it sounds like Tyler Lockett is a game time decision with trending, upside, before their next game. And, Gordon and him are probably not as great options. If Lockett's out, they have a whole bunch of receptions and touchdown receptions
100%.
to fill.
One name that I want you as a fantasy player not to chase, Kyle Rudolph. Please don't go out and chase the points on Kyle Rudolph. I'm telling you now. I've rostered him in Dynasty. I've had him to start the year. It's not a road that you want to go down. Don't buy into the recency performance, okay? Kyle Rudolph, 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. His production is based off of 7 receptions and 37 yards. Put that shirt down, okay? Next week, he has this week he has Denver, which not a good matchup. And the week after, he's on bye. So, 1, don't chase the points on Kyle Rudolph because the production has come off of basically nothing. It's all touchdown upside. If you take away his touchdowns, which are hard to predict, Kyle Rudolph is like, a bottom of the barrel tight end, getting 1 or 2 receptions a week, right? Denver, bye. I'm waiting on Kyle Rudolph if I want to roster him. Okay, so as of right now, I'm staying away. I'm not chasing the points. I think you should do the same. You are the Vikings fan, so I'm going to flip it over to you. But is the assessment fair on Kyle Rudolph?
The assessment is fair. It's the touchdown and 2-point conversion.
Right. You have to add that in too.
They have led to a lot of his fantasy points. That being said, he's definitely trending in the right direction. But when you have to face Von Miller and Denver's defense, and then you're on bye, this is a guy that you can, add to your watch list. Maybe just watch the Denver game, watch him play, think about it over the bye week, and I'm sure you can probably grab him at the end of the bye week if you really do need a tight end. He's waking up. The offense is looking for him. Like, he made some great catches, but it is incredibly touchdown dependent. And normally you could say the same thing about kind of a Jared Cook or something. So it's at least he's waking up.
Landon is in the chat. He is in the chat. Oh my goodness,
Lord.
He loves Rudy. I know he loves Rudy. Guess what, Landon? Kyle Rudolph has scored 26 points in the last 2 weeks. He's scored 58 over the course of the season. That's exactly half.
Lock up your daughters. Landon is in the chat.
Cut him run. That was short-lived. Anyways,
Cool.
Parting words. Don't chase the points on Kyle Rudolph, please.
Yeah, let it breathe. Give it some time. Go Vikes, go.
Go Packers, man. As you can see. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for those that stopped by to watch. We're going to try and do this a little bit more each and every week. If you are still with us or you drop by today, please hit that subscribe button. Free to you. Helps us. A like, a comment in the comment section. Maybe people that you are contemplating picking up if you weren't able to find us during our live time, but you do find the video tonight. Go ahead, leave us a comment, and we will do our best to get back to you before you have to put that claim in. If you want to get us on social media, you can do so right up at the top. Yeah, my camera's over here. Right up at the top, right there. SMS_fantasy. That is on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Hey, Maddie. Do it every week. Absolutely, we should. Podcast platforms. We are on basically everything. You can get us at Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. That would be amazing. Check us out. And we do this. We do this on YouTube every single Sunday as well. We do starts and sits live on Sleeper. So we have a Sleeper chat, but we've now been having it onto YouTube. So hope you guys are enjoying. And where are those fancy mugs I keep hearing about? Matt, I will send you an email tomorrow. Get off my back.
He will kill you. You need to get him.
Really appreciate him, though. I can't wait to meet him. All right. For Mack and Scott, we're going to sign off, and we'll see you guys. We're recording tomorrow, so we'll see you Saturday. The
right back at it.
Episode. The full hour. You're welcome. See ya.